To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all.
You're up. Go to the
Thank you.
directions, Aaron.
Okay. We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. That first sentence tells us who authored the basic text for Alcoholics Anonymous.
And this is your first time doing it, so we actually have the readers do it. So, Pinky,
Okay.
Pinky, could you read the second line, please?
To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book.
The second sentence tells us why they went to the trouble to publish the basic text.
And Nancy, can you read the third line, please?
For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary.
Thank you. And the third sentence suggests the big book is all we will ever need to be successful in sobriety.
And Pinky, if you could read the fourth and fifth lines, please.
We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person.
The fourth and fifth sentences tell us that the big book is also for those who care about us.
And Nancy, can you read the sixth line, please?
And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all.
And the sixth sentence is supported by the fact that the Big Book has given birth to over 200 anonymous fellowships that have nothing to do with drinking.
Our Roman numeral pages will be from the fourth edition. If you happen to be using a third edition, the pages that we give will be one page behind the page that we give in the third edition. And page XIV, give you guys a second to turn to it. The only requirement for membership is an honest desire to stop drinking. Traditions 3 and 5. We have lost our understanding of honest by the time we decide to come to AA, so that requirement has been eliminated. If a person is serious about living sober, they had better have an honest desire to stop drinking and be willing to follow the directions in the book.
The foreword to the second edition gives a historical account of the first 20 years of our history. How Bill found Dr. Bob, how they got busy looking for alcoholics to try to help, how their success attracted to the attention of some of our leading citizens, how we received some very favorable publicity, Jack Alexander's article, how the onslaught of new prospects forced Bill to develop the traditions, and then we hammer the statement on page XX.
Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses, and among those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings at first and decided they didn't want the program. But great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed. So 75% plus got sober and remained that way. In the early 1940s, the Cleveland groups were running at a 92% success rate due to using Big Book sponsorship.
Then, Bill published the 12 and 12 in 1953, and by 1965, our success rate had dropped to 50%. Unfortunately, many newcomers are encouraged to try to use the 12 and 12 as their source of directions. Bill W. was the principal author of the Big Book and the sole author of the 12 and 12. On page 17 of the 12 and 12, Bill stated, "The Book of Alcoholics Anonymous became the basic text of the fellowship, and it still is. This present volume proposes to broaden and deepen the understanding of the 12 steps as first written in the earlier work. By saying this, Bill indicates that the directions for the 12 steps are only in the Big Book, not in the 12 and 12.
Then in the late 60s, we started discussion participation meetings that failed to stick with our singleness of purpose. So by 1980, we had dropped to a 33% recovery rate, the result of which was we started ignoring the practice of focusing on our solution, and we drifted into group therapy. For recent years, our success rate has decreased to what appears to be less than 5% for those finding as much as 5 years of sobriety.
While there has been dramatic change in our fellowship, the program has remained unchanged. Consequently, the 4th edition reads the same as the 1st edition.
And let's all turn to page 30, and we are going to look in the middle paragraph at 2 sentences. Alyssa, could you start with that, please, starting with "we learned"?
Yes. Page 30. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery.
Thank you. Nope, that's it right there. Thank you. In our heart of hearts, we must know that we are victims of a killer disease before we can begin recovery.
Now return to the doctor's opinion, page XXVII, 4th edition. First paragraphs, the doctor writes, and Nancy, could you start with the subject presented?
On page XXVII?
Correct. Thank you.
What paragraph?
It starts with the subject presented, and you'll end at drug addiction.
I don't see the subject.
Page XXVII, and
Oh, I have I. Okay, I'm in the wrong page.
it's
Okay.
that extra
Yeah.
I that gets us.
Yes, it's the extra. Okay, now I'm so just the subject presented in this book seems to me to be of paramount importance to those afflicted with alcohol addiction.
Keep going, one more.
One more?
Yeah, one more
Yes.
sentence.
Okay, I say this after many years' experience as a medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country, treating alcoholic and drug addiction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We identify who Dr. Silkworth was, how he wound up at Towns Hospital, how his opinion opened the door for recovery. Until we understand a problem, we cannot find a solution. I use an example of walking out to my car, putting the key in the ignition, and the damn thing won't start. Problem. I can sit on my butt and talk about the car not starting until hell freezes over, but that will get me nowhere. I look under the hood. I see that the battery cable is corroded. I know what the problem is, so the solution becomes very evident. I need a new battery cable, but that doesn't solve my problem. I still must take the action necessary to obtain a new battery cable, replace the bad one, and now I'm on my way. Understand the problem, know what the solution is, then take the action to make the solution a reality.
From the first paragraph on page XXVIII, we present the allergy, which makes us powerless over alcohol. Pinky, can you read the first sentence, please?
We believe, wait,
Yep.
we're on section
Yep.
B, okay. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker.
Thank you. The phenomenon of craving, which is the manifestation of the allergy.
And Nancy, the last paragraph on page XXVIII is where we find the initial information regarding the unmanageability. The alcoholic mind cannot distinguish the truth from the false. Nancy, would you read that entire paragraph into the next page, please?
Men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that, while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontent, unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks which they see others taking with impunity. After they have succumbed in the desire again, as so many do, the phenomenon of craving develops. They pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience the entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery.
Thank you so much. We carefully dissect the whole paragraph. First, what is the effect alcoholic men and women get from drinking alcohol?
Why is it so important that we have this spiritual event occur in our lives? Well, Dr. Silkworth said that we drink essentially because we like the effect produced by alcohol. What is the effect an alcoholic gets from drinking? When we alcoholics had a few drinks, we were amazed at the change in the way we thought and the way we felt. A few drinks produced an entire psychic change.
Now, let's go to page 83 of the Big Book and examine the 9th step promises. We're going to begin each phrase with, when I had a few drinks. We're going to read each line in the first person in the past tense. For example, the first promise would be, when I had a few drinks. If I was painstaking about this phase of my development, I was amazed before I was halfway through. So, Pinky, would you take the next one, please?
When I had a few drinks, I was going to know a new freedom and a new happiness.
Did you?
I sure did. Nancy?
When I had a few drinks, I will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it.
Did you ever come out of a blackout in a place you hadn't planned on visiting, with people you hadn't planned on being with, and learned you had done some things you sure wish you hadn't done? Because of the guilt and remorse, it was to be a secret. And then go into a bar and have a few drinks and tell some poor stranger the whole story.
I certainly did.
Pinky?
When I had a few drinks, I would comprehend the word serenity, and I knew peace.
Did you too find that serenity and peace of mind replaced the turmoil with a few drinks?
Oh yeah. Nancy?
When I had a few drinks, no matter how far down the scale I have gone, I will see how my experience can benefit others.
How willing were you to share your whole life story with a poor drunk who had just really had a bad experience?
I love to talk about how bad my life was.
When I had a few drinks, that feeling of uselessness and self-pity would disappear.
With a few drinks, did you feel that you just might really have a purpose in this world and feel sorry for those critters that didn't have what you had, although you just weren't too sure what it was you had?
Almost every time.
Nancy?
When I had a few drinks, I would lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in my fellows.
Did a few drinks make you a little more interested in people, especially of the opposite sex?
Can I buy you a drink, honey?
When I had a few drinks, self-seeking would slip away.
Did a few drinks make you somewhat generous?
Drinks for everyone!
When I had a few drinks, my whole attitude and the outlook upon life will change.
Did a few drinks take you from a gray, gloomy day to one that was bright and hopeful?
From a shade of brown to rosy pink with just a couple.
When I had a few drinks, fear of people and economic insecurity would leave me.
Did you enjoy being the company of people sober?
Leave me alone.
When I had a first,
Did a few drinks diminish your concern for financial difficulties?
How am I going to pay these bills? I think I better have a couple of drinks and figure it out.
okay, when I had a first drink, I will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us.
Did you two find that you were able to think much more clearly and wisely with a few drinks?
You bet. I had answers to questions that hadn't even been asked.
The unmanageability is clearly presented in the last sentence of that paragraph.
I will suddenly realize that booze is doing for me what I could not do for myself.
From the article Ways to Stop Drinking, you can get some ideas of how we apply the information Dr. Silkworth proposed.
The newcomer is also reminded that The newcomer is also reminded that they need be mindful of the over-counter myths such as cough syrup, mouthwash, flavor extracts, etc., and that their healthcare providers should know that they are alcoholics, so the professionals will be mindful of what they prescribe. We emphasize that they themselves are not responsible for their sobriety, so be honest with those who have a need to know. We should also be aware of supplements and the ingredients listed. Just because it says healthy doesn't mean it's safe for us. Some of the ingredients may trigger the craving. Some supplements do contain alcohol as a soluble base. No matter how long we have been sober, alcohol in any form can be deadly. It can be very easy to over-medicate when self-medicating.
We have helped the newcomer to understand the problem. We may now breeze through Bill's story by looking at the events that describe the progression of alcoholism in his life. And we're going to bounce a lot of pages here, and we're going to start off on page 2. And Alyssa, it will be the middle of the first paragraph, 10 lines down from the top of the page, one sentence starting with, though my.
Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife.
Lois is on his ass about his drinking.
And Nancy, on page 3, bottom of the page, last sentence, starting with I begin.
Oh, I began to be jittery in the morning.
Thank you. Bill was beginning to be jittery in the morning.
And let's move to page 5, please. Starting with the first sentence, it will be liquor ceased. Alyssa.
Liquor ceased to be a luxury. It became a necessity.
Liquor ceased to be a luxury, it became a necessity. He's lying about his drinking, hiding bottles, etc.
And Nancy, page 5, third paragraph, 4 sentences, starting with then I got.
Then I got, in the first sentence.
Third paragraph, 4 sentences, and
Third
it's
paragraph.
then I got a promising.
Okay, then I got a promising business opportunity. The stocks were at the low point of 1932, and I had somehow found the goods to buy. I was to share generously in the profit. Then I went on a prodigious bender, and that chance vanished.
Thank you very much. Bill lost an opportunity to make some money because he drank.
And Alyssa, continuing on page 5, fourth paragraph, 4 sentences, starting with I woke.
I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever.
He made up his mind to never touch another drop.
And Nancy, again on page 5, 5th paragraph, 3 sentences, starting with shortly afterward.
Shortly afterward, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. Where had been my high resolve?
Thank
I
you.
sit. Okay.
And Bill returned home drunk.
And let's flip over to page 7. Alyssa, it will be the end of the first full paragraph, 1 sentence, starting with best of all.
You said page 7, right?
Page 7, yes. I believe it's a right-hand page. End of the first full paragraph, 1 sentence, starting with best of all.
Okay, best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, I had been seriously ill, bodily and mentally.
Bill met Dr. Silkworth and learned what was wrong with him.
And let's turn to page 8. And Nancy, first paragraph, 4 sentences, starting with quicksand stretched.
Which paragraph?
First paragraph, 4 sentences, and starting with quicksand.
Quicksand. Okay. Quicksand stretched around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master.
Thank you. Bill surrendered to the problem. Step 1.
We use the next paragraph to exemplify the simplicity of our program. First paragraph, first sentence, Pinky, starting with trembling.
Trembling, I stepped from the hospital a broken man.
Now if you will go to the last sentence, starting with I was
to know happiness, peace, and usefulness in a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes.
A wonderful life is a result of having taken the action Ebby had prescribed for him.
Now on page 10 and 11, Nancy, last paragraph, page 10, first paragraph, page 11, starting with when they talked.
When they talk of God, personal to me, who was love, superhuman strength and direction, I became irritated and my mind snapped shut against such theory. To Christ, I considered the certainty of a great man, not too closely followed by those who claimed him. Do I go
His
on?
moral teaching, yeah.
His moral teaching, most excellent. For myself, I had adopted those parts which seemed convenient and not too difficult. The rest I disregarded.
Thank you very much. And Bill's rebellion at the idea of a spiritual solution, identifying him as a hard-nosed agnostic.
And let's turn to page 12, please. And Alyssa, it will be in the second paragraph 2 sentences starting with "my friend"?
My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?"
The freedom and responsibility we are given to develop an idea of God, to develop an idea of God that we can begin to bet our life on.
We then explain the simplicity of step 2 by the fact that Bill saw his old drinking buddy, who was supposedly in the nut house for alcoholic insanity, sober. In the nut house for alcoholic insanity, sober. Both of them had been powerless over alcohol, but Ebby was sober and Bill was going to die. Ebby had found the power that Bill was unaware of. Ebby gave Bill hope, the beginning of coming to believe. From that hope, Bill finally became willing to try Ebby's plan of action. Again, the idea of step 2.
And let's turn to page 13. Alyssa, the first paragraph, 1 sentence, starting with "at the."
At the hospital, I was separated from alcohol for the last time.
Thank you. Entering Towns Hospital on December 11th, 1934, going into DT's. Taking step 3 on the 3rd day of his sobriety. Ebby visiting Bill in the hospital on the 4th and 5th days to help Bill take the action Ebby had learned to apply in his life, the result of which was a spiritual experience. Bill left the hospital on December 18th, 1934, at the end of 7 days, and he lived 36 years without taking another drink. We are here because of the action that Bill took, not the meetings he attended.
We now identify the meaning of step 1. Powerless because of the allergy. Unmanageability due to the mind that cannot remember that we have the allergy. It can only remember the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks.
Relieving the feeling of restlessness, irritability, and discontentedness.
Therefore, we are powerless over our body and powerless over our mind where alcohol is concerned. We are screwed.
Boy, no kidding. Let's turn to page 24, ladies, and Nancy. Squiggly lines in italics in the second paragraph, starting with "the fact."
I read the whole thing.
Yes.
The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago, whereas we are without defense against the first drink.
And on page 43, Pinky, last paragraph. Starting with "once more."
You're muted, Pinky.
Okay, I'm like, wait a second, Aaron, I'm here reading. Once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink, except in a few rare cases. Neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from higher power.
And that's okay. That's okay, Alyssa. We were lip reading, some of us, so we got it. I can only speak for myself. Of course,
I was so excited I got there so quickly.
I want you to read double time.
I would like to thank our readers for reading to us tonight, and we will continue on. We're almost done. From the hope of hearing a recovered alcoholic tell us their story of what they were like, what happened, and what they are like now, or reading the 44 personal stories in the Big Book, is the beginning of step 2. If lack of power is the problem, then a power greater than ourselves must be the solution. And we see that the recovered alcoholic has found that power. It takes no great mind to see that if lack of power or powerlessness is my problem, then a power greater than myself must be the solution. Once I can see that, I'm faced with a very simple decision. Am I or am I not willing to follow the clear-cut directions for recovery? But I need someone who knows how to do this, aka a sponsor.
So the simplicity of step 3 is to return my will and my life over to the care of God, of my understanding. I learn how to turn my will and my life over to this power by taking steps 4 through 7. But I need someone, a sponsor, who has working knowledge of taking the steps as directed in the Big Book, who can guide me through this process.
To determine if you've made a good choice in sponsors, it's pretty easy to tell. If they suggest that you open your Big Book or offer to read with you from pages XI and study to page 43, that is a good start in diagnosing step 1. These 51 pages will get you ready to see if you are ready to move on. Look at the first sentence on page 44. Aaron, that's read?
Oh yeah, it says pause, so they can read it. So I was giving them a moment. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something about alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic.
It tells you why it is so important to be thorough in your study to this point. From this study, we can separate the alcoholic from the non-alcoholic, which is so vital to the success of your group and AA as a whole.
Now take the test. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely.
How many of you have promised you'd never drink again? Appears you fail to manage the decision, so your life is unmanageable where alcohol is concerned.
Or if when drinking, you have little control over the amount you take.
How many of you cannot start drinking without getting drunk? It would appear that you too are powerless over alcohol. Step 1.
If that is the case, you may be suffering from an illness.
Chronic alcoholism of the hopeless variety,
which only a spiritual experience will conquer.
How many meetings must you attend to have a spiritual experience, or how many steps must you take to have this blessed promise become a reality in your life?
Page 44 through page 57 will open the door for you to be able to consider your own conception of God, of your own understanding.
Page 58 answers that stupid comment that we hear too often in meetings. I don't know how it works. The first sentence tells us how it works. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. In other words, we need to follow the clear-cut directions in the Big Book.
The program of Alcoholics Anonymous is a spiritual program. On page 59, we will find the first of several prayers. We ask His protection and care with complete abandon. There are one or more prayers for each and every step from step. For each and every step from step 3 through step 12, which reminds us that the God of our understanding is the source of our recovery. We learn to invite Him to be the solution of all of our problems.
On page 62, we are told what our real problem is: selfishness and self-centeredness. but we can never see it without some method of revealing the truth to us. So we make a decision to do precisely what our sponsor suggests and announce that decision in the prayer presented on page 63, aka the third step prayer. This prayer is the invitation to God to come into our lives.
One of the beautiful things about the Big Book is that it will tell us when to take a step, how to take the step, what the results or promises of having taken the step will be, and provides us with the prayers that make certain we are inviting the God of our understanding to be very involved in our recovery.
The last sentence on page 63 tells us that we now have to get busy and take the rest of the steps.
Steps 4 and 5 are diagnostic steps to learn if what they told us on page 62.
Selfishness and self-centeredness.
Is it true for us? The clear-cut directions for step 4 are found from pages 64 through 71, and there are 5 prayers for step 4.
On page 75, we find the clear-cut directions for step 5 and 2 fifth step prayers.
On page 76, we find the direction for step 6, which is nothing more than a commitment to God that we will become students and practitioners of the rest of the Big Book, and there we find the 6th step prayer.
On page 76, we find the 7th step prayer, which is to be prayed after we have done our part of steps 4 through 6. We now ask God to please do your part by making me different. This prayer is the completion of the prayer we started on page 63. This is where we find the Amen and finish the prayer. This is a cycle of 5 steps which started with the 3rd step prayer and finishes with the 7th step prayer.
On page 76, we will be most pleased to learn that if we have carefully followed the directions and taken step 4, that step 8 is all but a done deal.
From page 76 to page 83 are the directions for taking step 9, and 4 ninth step prayers are there.
Having carefully followed the path, the first 100 laid down for us, we have now had a spiritual awakening experience and have joined the first 100 as recovered alcoholics. The 9th step promises describe that blessed event.
On page 64, we take the first action to recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. By the time we get to page 83, we have recovered. We have joined the first 100. We have been given the power that we lacked to survive alcoholism. Carefully following the clear-cut directions outlined in just 20 pages of our basic text produces the miracle of recovery.
We are now to start our spiritual growth, and that occurs in step 10, 11, and 12.
The clear-cut directions for step 10 are contained in the paragraph on page 84, beginning with, "This thought brings us to step 10, which suggests we continue to take personal inventory."
A running start for learning how to communicate with the God of your understanding is very adequately covered on pages 86, 87, and 88.
And now that we have received the power, it is our primary job to pass that on to the next newcomer God puts in our life. The clear-cut directions for sponsorship are contained in chapter 7. But you won't find the 12-step prayer until you have reached the last page of the basic text. Ask him in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick.
There you have it. So utterly simple, yet so garbled in our meanings. I challenge you to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. The simplest guide that I've followed in working with others is, if it isn't in the big book, they don't need to be exposed to it.
I love having this part. If you are encouraged to wait until you have a better understanding of what our program is about, I have one question for you. How well did you like sex before you tried it? Well, you won't know a damn thing about the steps either until you have taken the action of taking the steps precisely as they were given to us. And that is a foundations meeting, ladies and gentlemen. We are now open for comments, questions, experience. Bring it on. Just raise those little paws. And if not, I guess we're all well. Enjoy this quiet period of meditation. Hey, Michael, come on in, brother. Here, let me send you a cue to unmute. There.
All right. Yeah, I was trying to find a thing to raise my hand. Hey, I got a question for everyone. The percentages, when you first read that in the beginning, how high they were, and I know the numbers were smaller, and now more people are in AA, but our numbers are still, the percentage is still small. I just want to know, what do you guys think is the reason for that? The book gave a reason, or well, Jamie, you read a reason why it was that way, but why do you think it is now?
I think it's the same reason. So I'm going to read the paragraph that Aaron read, and I'm going to reread the one that I read, and I'll touch on that. Then Bill published the 12 and 12 in 1953, and by 1965 our success rate had dropped to 50%. Unfortunately, many newcomers are encouraged to try to use the 12 and 12 as their source of directions. Bill was the principal author of the Big Book and the sole author of the 12 and 12. On page 17 of the 12 and 12, Bill stated, "The book Alcoholics Anonymous became the basic text of the fellowship and still is. This present volume proposes to broaden and deepen the understanding of the 12 steps as first written in the earlier work." By saying this, Bill indicates that the directions for the 12 steps are only in the Big Book and not in the 12 and 12. Second paragraph. Then in the late 60s, we started discussion participation meetings that failed to stick with our singleness of purpose, so by 1980 we had dropped to 33%. The result of which was we started ignoring the practice of focusing on our solution, and we drifted into group therapy. For recent years, our success rate has decreased to what appears to be less than 5% for those finding as much as 5 years of sobriety. So, this is just my thoughts on it, a little bit of my experience too. When I got sober, which was, just a second, I'm going to take a look just because when I got sober 12,389 days ago, I checked into a detox that was a 30, 60, 90 day treatment center. I was only able to spend 6 days there because they didn't have a bed for me after that. They had a couple of AA meetings, they had a couple of NA meetings, and when I got out, I was scared to death. I was afraid I was going to drink, but I did what they suggested I do. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous and I got a sponsor, and I got a sponsor that would take me through the book. And many of you, I think all of you know who my sponsor is. So, and that sponsor and I have been together almost 34 years. I used to be now I was never directed to use the 12 and 12 as a source of directions. Though I used to think it was until a few years ago, and I really started getting into our big book study and everything. But I used to sit in meetings with the 12 and 12 when it was a 12 and 12 study, and a big book when it was a big book study, and I would cross-reference things out of the two books. Here's what I have to remember, and here's what I've learned since I did that. The 12 steps in the 12 and 12 are Bill's personal experience. Maybe some of it's in people he sponsored and so on, and it's his observations. But it's got a whole lot of psychological stuff in there. And the simplicity of our disease is, I'm an alcoholic that has an allergy to alcohol. From the time I pick up the first thimbleful, I'm off and running. And it makes my life unmanageable, as we shared. I think sometimes because we're trying to read too many books on recovery and too many books on, or do too many programs, or my psychiatrist or my therapist tells me, well, I should be doing this and this and this, and they don't really understand what Alcoholics Anonymous is and what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. Sometimes we get distracted, I like that word, distracted from focusing on what the directions are in the big book. Does that make sense? I think that's why we have such low recovery rates. There was another part here as we were going through it. Let me see if I can find it here. It was towards the last of it. I don't see what I was looking for. But think about the simplicity of our book. And in district, or in area, as you well know, Michael, the whole controversy over the plain language big book, right? I'm just going to use this as an example. It's another book because so many people didn't think that the language, hi Ezra, so many people did not feel that the language in the big book was the language of the times, and so on. So what their hope is, people will buy this book at $11 a pop. It's 122 pages long, and then they'll read the big book after it. So in other words, this plain language big book is supposed to get them interested enough to read the big book. I don't get it, but that's just me personally. I'm sure it will help someone. But here's what I know, is I love 1940s style big book sponsorship. That's what we do in this group. That's the way we take people through. Everyone that I work with, and a couple of sponsees, and I have a couple of grand sponsees in here, know that we sit down and we read the book together line by line. And the beautiful thing about that is when we're doing that, I get to take the time and talk about the moving parts around that, a little bit of the history, and ask a series of questions, right? That's helpful. I think a huge part of the downfall has been in sponsorship as well, because we don't follow the directions that it gives us in the chapter working with others. I have never once had a sponsor who said, "Oh, you need to buy a house," or "You need to go out and get that girl." But I know that there's sponsors that do that. You know, it's not about them managing my life. It's about them helping me find, or me helping them find, their pathway to God and permanent sobriety. You ever meet anybody who says, "Yeah, I got a sponsor, and it's Tuesday night, and my sponsor's on the other side of the road," and I go, "Hey, spons, how are you?" while he's across the room, but I never talk to him. There's this idea, having a sponsor and being sponsored are two entirely different concepts. If I am being sponsored, I have someone that I am in the book with, I'm in the steps with all the time. And if I can't do that with the people that I work with, then I'm just the person that they call up to complain about life to, rather than take the actions. And I think that's one of the biggest downfalls that we have. Does all that make sense? There again, just my opinion. Great question, though. Plus, the other thing is we get into all kinds of other stuff that here again don't necessarily reconcile with the big book. You ever read some of our other meditation literature that's conference approved, and there'll be a passage out of the big book or the 12 and 12 or as Bill sees it or something, but then the person who shares after that, maybe they're in alignment with what that passage says with their experience, but oftentimes it's like, what the hell is he talking about wrecked cars? What's that got to do with what the passage has to say? So I think that's the problem. Does it answer it a little?
Well, it answers the question. There could be any number of reasons. I at work I crunch numbers when it comes to part of my job, and I could play with numbers. I could play with percentages, and I look at, if I just for example, I take something from last year or last month, year to date, and it increased 100%. Well, it may have went from 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
See, but that's just 2. But if I've got 1,000 on this one end, and I've got another 1,000, or those numbers, I have to play with those numbers to make the percentages look smaller or bigger. So increasing a crime rate just by 1% or another crime, it could show that I've doubled my crime rate when it's only been 2 instead of 1 for the month.
Right.
So when it comes to the percentages, I knew that back then there was 100 people, there was 1,000 people. There were, just then, and then when you have more people hungry, more people seeking help, and I know there's a lot of people out there that really want this thing, but that the number being so big worldwide, if you look at the percentages, then that percentages can very quickly drop and go down. When there may be tens of millions of people or tens of thousands of people that are actually getting it, that's still a lot more than 100
mm-hmm.
back in 1935 or 1936 when they did those percentages then. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Because we're an anonymous program, there's probably no real measuring stick to have an actual number, right? You're right, thousands of people get sober. At the same time, there are thousands of who come to Alcoholics Anonymous via court card, wife card, CPS card, whatever it may be, however they get there, that basically just do their time until, right? Until they can pick up the first drink again or whatever. And some of them never come back, and some of them do. So I really don't know I don't think that there's any accurate way of measuring. You know, the book talks about the first 100, but the actual working number when they started writing the book, there was about 64, 65, 67 people. They were up into the 70s. They dropped it back down. That's how they got those percentages in the day. But when the book first came, by the time the book came out on the market, there were 800 recovered alcoholics. And in just a 10-month short period, from 1940 or 1930 into 39 into 40, in just 10 months there became 8,000 recovered alcoholics because of the book. So we don't know what the actual numbers are, but I'm glad we're in the numbers that are.
Right.
William.
Yes, my name is William Alcoholic. And I'd like to read into you and just state it, what they call how tight is that the book that you can have the big book and get sober by yourself. They put the stories in the back and they put the further in the front. You know, but do you think that this had anything to do with the numbers they was talking about? In the 12 and 12, it says in the Pioneer on page 22, the last paragraph, it says, in the Pioneer time, none but the most desperate cases could swallow them and digest this unpalatable truth. Even these last graspers often had difficulty in realizing how hopeless they actually was. But a few of them did, and when these laid hold of AA principles with all the figures with which the drowning seas life preserved, they almost invariably got well. That is why the first edition of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, published when our membership was small, dealt with low bottom cases only. Many less desperate alcoholics tried AA, but did not succeed because they could not make the admission that they were hopeless. Now, along behind that, and Bill was like 13 years sober now whenever he wrote 12 and 12, so he realized he had something better than that. And then that this magical thing, 12 step, that not only worked for alcohol, it worked for Al-Anon and so many other 12 steps programs branched off of that. And since then, you know, so and Bill was crunching numbers in the beginning, you know, they weren't so much worried, you know, they were going there, straightening people up off the ground, bringing them in there, and a lot of those people that they straightened up, they couldn't get sober, you know, but you don't think that had nothing to do with it?
Yeah, you're 100% right. I have to remember something about that period of time compared to this period of time too. They actually went out and 12-stepped wet ones, right? That's not really something we do anymore. Somebody goes into a treatment center, they come in to Alcoholics Anonymous because it's recommended, like Mary, right, who just celebrated 5 months, because she's hungry for the message that we have, and she's growing. But how many people have you ever known, seen in a meeting, show up, they're on a court card, they take their card up at the last of the meeting, and once all of that's done, maybe a handful stay on and keep coming back because we planted some seeds, but others you never see again. you know, and that's a huge percentage. So I think that the numbers of the time in the percentages were accurate. I don't know that they are today. I do know that the Cleveland groups at that specific time were running at a 92% recovery rate because of big book sponsorship. And Clarence Schneider, when he was one of Dr. Bob's sponsees, and you know, guys would go to Dr. Bob and Bill and say, man, we're just not getting people sober. And they said, well, what are we doing? Well, we're doing the same thing you're doing. And they said, no, what are you doing? Right? And they tell them, and they'd say, that's not what we're doing. So they decided to put it down in the book. Right? When the book was published, Clarence tells Bob, well, we're going to meet over at Joe's house every Tuesday night, and we're going to use the book because now we have directions, and we're going to do big book sponsorship. But that's not the way that Bill and Bob were used to doing it. They were used to just sitting there having the conversation, getting somebody to hit their knees and do the prayers. And that's why the Cleveland groups were successful at having a 92% recovery rate. And you have to remember, in those first years, most of that was just in that small part between New York. The book talks about out west. Out west was Akron, Ohio, right? 400 miles away. Not really a long trip. But, you know, it trickled into Chicago and Minnesota and so on. So, I don't know. What I do know is, for me, I've got a responsibility that when people want to and are willing to sit down, they may have to read to me while I'm driving down the road, but we're still going through the book.
You know, that reminds me, I mean, I remember Bill's story of Bill talking about, you know, he's sponsoring all these people, and he was talking to his wife Lois, and that nobody's getting sober, but she said, well, you're staying sober. You know, to paraphrase all that. Well, I have worked with so many sponsees, and right now, they're all have went back out. I even lost one to death, this disease. But I've got one right now that's stuck on step 4. You know, so I get it, you know, and it's not, it's a simple, while it's simple, it's, you know, it's a hard program. It's hard for people to do that, and I guess maybe they're not completely committed. And I just like you said, some of them are not low bottom drunks. You know, they still have their job, they still have their homes, they still have their family, and so maybe they feel that, hey, this is not as serious as it is as I think it is, or maybe my life is not really on the line here, or maybe I got options. I don't know what they're thinking, but the bottom line is that all these guys that I've been working with are still going out, and I've got one guy that's still active. He's actually in service, and he's working through the steps with me. So I don't know what the answer is. All I know is that I want to be able to be here for someone if they need it, you know. And it's not, if I can just help one person, that's fine. I don't have to help 10 or 100 people. As long as I'm helping this one person, if that's all I can do to help this one person, then that's enough.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before I bring Alyssa in, I want to ask a question. You don't even have to raise your hands or nod your heads, but here's the question. Comes from page 44. There's 2 statements that we ask ourselves in question form in the first person. If when I really want to, I cannot stop on my own. Or if when drinking, I have no control over the amount I take. I'm definitely an alcoholic. But is there anybody here that doesn't really believe that? Because if we believe it, then we are convinced. That's the end of step 1, right? We are convinced that we are alcoholics. But the people we work with may not be there. And when I'm working with somebody, my goal is to get them through the doctor's opinion to that page right there to ask those two questions. And if they can say, nope, I can't stop. Nope, I got no control over it. And they can truly in their heart admit it. Step one is done. And now my goal is to get them to page 45 where it talks about lack of power. That was our dilemma, and we had to find a power by which we could live, right? That's I like to call that the God page, right? Because that's the introduction from higher power, power greater than ourselves, to God. Alyssa, come on in. I know you got some experience, especially with your workshop that you do.
I know. I was just listening. I was putting stuff in the closet, and I was like, "Oh, Clarence Schneider. All right, I do." Alyssa, recovered alcoholic. And Jamie, you and I will have to, because I know that what the parts that you go to, that's what Clarence Schneider, the document that I use, the Big Book sponsor document. I do this workshop twice a month. It's 4 hours, and I take people through all 12 steps. I give them an introduction and an understanding. And when they walk away from this workshop, they have 3 complete inventories: resentment, fear, and harmful conduct, including sex. And we go over the directions of the 9th step amends, but they're suggested to get with their sponsor because it says wherever. It's on God's time, and we need assistance. We need guidance in doing those amends. Here, I'm going to move so that you can see me. But that with my experience, in the last, so I'm going to mark from New Year's Eve because that's the first one that I started really documenting, because I had 69 people in that session. And every month since then, I've probably taken like 40 people through. And having that sense of urgency and taking them through, they get the introduction and understanding. So they hit the key points of every step, and basically from what I see, and I haven't, compared, well, I have, but I haven't sat down with the packet to the book and like highlighted what isn't in the packet, within the reading of those steps. But basically the stories aren't in there. They do give analogies, but, it gets people into the work, because that step a month is killing people. I don't know where, I don't find the directions for that in the Big Book. I only find 2 times where it tells us to pause, and that's once before we take the 3rd step, and it says we thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready. And then the second time it tells me to pause is after I do my 5th step. It says we find a place where we can be quiet for an hour, carefully reviewing what we have just done. Thanking God from the bottom of our hearts that we know Him better. So, and the people that, I haven't done the numbers as calculations, but at the end of that workshop, they've had a spiritual awakening. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps. And it's not scary to them anymore. Like, they're not, that 4th step isn't, and that helped me so much because it's the process that I get to keep with me. And that's because everything in there comes right out of the Big Book. Everything in that packet comes, that Clarence Schneider document, it's all pulled from the Big Book. So it's not like they were doing their own thing, but I do it twice a month. Every time I do it, more gets revealed. And, the feedback that I get from people on that. And then, like, I will have a sponsee go to it, but then I'll still read the big book with them, line by line. I'm still working with them. And, like I said, every time I open that book, more gets revealed. It's the ones that, in my experience, it's the ones that are going to the 12 and 12 looking for that direction. But I heard something tonight that I hadn't heard before. And that was what Jamie said. You'll have to remind me what page number that was on of the 12 and 12, where Bill reverts back. Because honestly, I haven't.
Page 17.
Okay. Where he says that the directions that outline the program of action are found in the big book. Yeah, I'm going to use that line now. Because honestly, I've maybe opened my 12 and 12 a handful of times. The only reason it's broken in and looks like it's been used is because it got knocked off of my nightstand and it hit my elliptical when I was on my elliptical. So, but, the directions are clearly outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And, I've seen success with doing the 12 and 4, but the work isn't done. The work is never done. It's those people that, in my experience, that think that I can do this once a year or every 6 months I'll do a 4th step. And then my question is, well, where's step 10? If you're living in step 10, but that's just me, and, that's my, but since I've been doing that, my sobriety is on fire. Like, they talk about the 4th dimension of existence on page, what is that, 25? Or is that 23? My numbers are. Here, I'll read it. Can I read it, Jamie? Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. And would you also put your link to that meeting in the chat for everyone and when your next one is?
Yes. Next Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. But I will put it in there. So on page 25, it says, there is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we came to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it, when, therefore, we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved. There was nothing left for us to do but to pick up a simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence of which we have not ever dreamed. I, like, a 4th dimension, I'm in, like, the 96th dimension. That's just, that's what that service opportunity has done for me. Along with this big book study that we do, tomorrow night that we do here. This one started it, but having be able to watch people recover, and then if they stay and they help others, like if they stay in that other room and I get to see, like, that's a promise, but that's just the miracle of it, and it's so amazing. Last year I was dry. I started falling off in like December, gave away all my service positions, and then I ended up in the hospital at the end of July, hanging on by the last hemoglobin that I think I had in my body. And God wasn't done with me yet. And this last 12 months, as a result of working these steps and practicing these principles in all of my affairs on this big book study, because this is the first place I came back to. You know, it's been absolutely amazing. You know, I don't talk to myself. Like, I'm very careful. I don't use the D word or the P word. There are opportunities. You know, I attend a meeting, bad moments, never a bad day. And Sunday, I had a situation where I opened the pantry and the bottom two shelves, which had the heaviest items on them, fell on my feet. And it did not feel good, and the F word slipped, right? And my kids were there, and I was like, oh gosh. And I got on a meeting, and it was just a little bit after 11:30, so it was bad moments, never a bad day, and I had to calm, get myself centered. I talked to Aaron, and I made my amends to him for how I reacted in that situation. And I kind of went into a momentarily prayer meditation with God, and it was like he clearly said to me, you didn't have a bad moment, you had a self-will moment. So I don't even have bad moments anymore. Like, and that's so true, because self-will is the problem. And if I can catch it here, it doesn't have to come out, because my heart doesn't want to treat people that way. My spirit does not want to treat people that way. And yeah, so that's my experience with that and this. And so, yeah, thank you for letting me share on that. I love you all. All right, I'm ready to go now.
Thank you, Alyssa. I'm gonna share this from you or with you from page 17. The book Alcoholics Anonymous became the basic text for the fellowship, and it still is. You know, and what it's saying about the 12 and 12 itself is just that it is to broaden the earlier work. You know, I'll give you an example on page 52, which is step 4. The common symptoms of emotional insecurity. The most common symptoms of emotional insecurity are worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. These stem from causes which seem to be within us, and at other times come from without. Outside sources, outside influences. You know, one of the most very important things on page 48 of the 12 and 12 is it gives us the 7 deadly sins. So when it talks about selfishness and self-centeredness and self-pity and fear and all of that on page 62, are all of those things rooted in the 7 deadly sins? In my experience, yes, they are. So, in the 12 and 12, it gives us to avoid falling into confusion over the names of these defects should be called. Let's take a universally recognized list of major human failings. The 7 deadly sins of pride, greed, anger, lust, gluttony, envy, and sloth. It is not by accident that pride heads up this procession. So those are all things that I essentially need to take a look at when doing inventory work, because they help reveal the truth about me. So the 12 and 12 is a wonderful expansion, but there again, the directions for taking the steps aren't there. The prayers, you know, chapter 5, while we are introduced to the 12 steps and the ABCs in chapter 5, chapter 5 in our big book tells us only how to do 2 things. how to take step 3 and how to take step 4. And it gives us the prayers we'll use, the actions we'll take, and the promises that will be the result from using the prayers and taking the actions. It really is pretty simple. You know, and to answer your other question as well, Michael, your original question, you know, we live in such a secular world today. We live in a whole world today, even in this country, that wants to completely eliminate any God talk or spiritual talk, right? People just don't want that stuff in their lives. But yet, we have a disease, and it told us in the doctor's opinion, we have a disease that our only relief is through a spiritual experience or practice. You know, what's my choice to be? I don't want to be a gutter drunk. I don't want to be the wino sitting on the street corner, and I used to be that wino. I don't know. Anybody else? Because I'm talking way too much.
I just want to say, I think Elise was sharing what she said. My recovery was very slow, and I took time. It was the education where people, the meeting, the literature all combined. But the one thing that Bill really drives home when he's working with others, and he says something like this: know your prospect. You know? On the outside, we all got 2 eyes. I ain't gonna say all, but basic human outside, 2 eyes, mouth, nose, ears, and stuff. We look the same, but nobody knows the trauma that is done through alcoholism. So Bill said, know your prospect. And not only did he say that, he said, place the spirit and work with others, place that spiritual kit at the feet. And Bill learned a very valuable lesson when he was trying to get sober, when he went to Lord and say, nobody getting sober, and went to Dr. Simple, and Dr. Simple would say, don't lecture, don't preach, don't talk no more at hilltop, tell your story. And I've been around alcohol around this, and I don't like to judge people, but I've seen some people who were so up there. Matter of fact, I knew a guy just died not too long ago. He had been around Alcoholics Anonymous for 44 years before he died, and he couldn't put a year together. But he knew the big book. Do and do. He knew the big book. I guess the action was the key to that. He couldn't stay sober. So it's what I learned about that, not to put sobriety so high on the shelf that the newcomer can't get. As Dr. Bob said, keep it simple. Because a lot of damage, for me, when I was out there, I did a lot of damage. I had did some things in life, and whenever I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I questioned the thing that I had done in life. Because the damage that I had done to alcohol. And I was with somebody who just, anything, take me out of myself, get it. So these things have to be with me whenever I do. And if they get sober, hey, I'm not blaming myself, and I'm not blaming them. You know, you just plant the seed.
Thank you, brother. Good to have you. Xavier, welcome, brother. Come on in. Whoops. You got a lot of echo. Can you turn your volume up or something? So it sounds like you're 16 feet from the mic.
Oh no, it's been like this all day.
Okay, that's better. That's better.
Good. All right, so glad to be here. I got away from the kids for a minute. So yeah, interesting discussion. Appreciated attending tonight. I mean, my experience. I mean, I'll hit 5 years, in 10 days, assuming I don't get wasted. But I was, if I stop doing the work, I become a dry drunk in a few seconds. I mean, it just happened again recently, And then you just get back in the program, get back doing the things that we learn how to do. But my experience, and it was an interesting discussion earlier, if we compare, like, at least what they show the first 100 is, At least around here, when I go to meetings, almost nobody knows how to do the steps. And I know that from experience because I think a lot of people that walk into the rooms are not alcoholics. At best, they're heavy drinkers. You get a lot of drug addicts that are not alcoholics that come there, like you said, for court. So you get basically a watered down version of human beings coming to Alcoholics Anonymous that might not even need the program. And maybe whether it's socially acceptable or they get pushed here. And the question is, do all these people that are not alcoholics, does it hurt Alcoholics Anonymous in general? I would argue for sure, statistics-wise, because if you just look at percentage of people that recover, because if you have a bunch of non-alcoholics not doing the program, getting some relief by just going to meetings, I mean, why would they do all this work if they don't have to? And then they have nothing to give when they sponsor other people and they tell them just to show up to meetings, they do talk therapy. That's going to really hurt the real alcoholic that they describe in chapters 2 and 3. Like, it's going to hurt them a lot. And I would definitely put myself in that category. So I would think today, and I'm a big believer in this, I feel bad for a lot of people that walk in these rooms and don't find a solution. Because quite frankly, most people have never gone through the mechanics of doing the steps. So they have almost nothing to offer other than I'll sponsor you and tell you to go to meetings and let's do more talk therapy, and I might even tell you how to live. And it's unfortunate. So it's fun to read about the original 100. The last thing I'd say is I heard this concept once. It was in an old video, I think from 10 or 20 years ago. This guy was going on about how Alcoholics Anonymous meetings used to also mean the big book. Like one was synonymous with the other. And over time that changed, and the meetings became something completely different than the big book. And that's one of the theories was there's a million treatments. People get out of treatment and they start teaching what they learn in treatment, which are concepts that have nothing to do with the big book. For me, the big book are specific actions, they're mechanics that if I take these actions on a daily basis, I get a spiritual experience on a daily basis. And like throughout the day. When I stop doing it, I regress back to my alcoholism very quickly. And then when I bring people to the book and sponsor them, I bring them to the book and teach them the mechanics. And when I work with my sponsor and actually call, like I should.
There's other smiles about that in the room as well.
Oh, good. I'm not alone. Thank you, Aaron. I'm not alone. But one of the things I love the most is, who cares what I did yesterday? Who cares what I did a week ago? Who cares what I did a year ago? What am I doing today, and how am I applying my life to these actions today? Just like working out. Who cares if I worked out yesterday? How do I apply it today? Tell me that's what matters. And if I'm not doing it today, I'm regressing back into my alcoholism, and that's a slippery, scary slope. So, long story short, my personal experience, just a full circle. I firmly believe, at least in Minnesota and the Twin Cities, which is one of the sober capitals of the U.S., because we have so many treatment centers, especially very famous ones. Majority of people here, human beings in AA rooms, have no idea how to do the steps. A vast majority are drug addicts and alcoholics. Some are both, but some are not. And then there are a lot of people that are heavy drinkers. They're not even close to alcoholic. And a lot of those people will go to meeting after meeting, and they'll get better, and they'll look amazing, and they'll be 10 years sober, collecting their chips, saying, I just keep going to meetings, I just keep coming back, which is amazing for them. And it's sober, it was very decent. So I'm glad that I can spread the message to people that want it, and I can teach them the mechanics straight out of the book. And I wish more people, for people like me, I wish more people would talk about the actual steps and not talk a lot less about the other things. So that's my soapbox, man. I appreciate it. I feel really good.
Love it, brother. Thank you. Glad you're here. Yiddy, you want to chime in? Come on in. You know no one gets out alive.
No, you're right.
By the way, this was Aaron's first time ever doing a foundation meeting. You did a wonderful job, brother.
Actually, it was my second time, and my first time was almost 3 years ago when I first came into this group. And it was a similar situation to what happened tonight. So I don't know. Thank you for letting me do the service. I didn't know that. but I like how you explain that, Xavier. And yeah, definitely. I don't know. I have a 12 and 12. I don't know much about it because when I'm in it, my sponsor takes me through Alcoholics Anonymous, the big book. He doesn't tell me to get to 12 and 12. He doesn't tell me to go to Bill W. or as Bill sees it. Or if I notice that in my recovery, and I can only talk about myself, I don't know actually I do know where I would be if my heart is not in it. But I do want to get sober, and I have a sponsor, and I'm not knocking them because they have a lot of time, but you know, they were, in my eyes now, they were going for all the wrong reasons. I was going for all the wrong reasons. And maybe it was because I was ready, but oh yeah, my point was, I was told to do the workbook, do the workbook, do the workbook. If you do it in the workbook, and I don't know about you, but when someone tells me to do something, and not even a suggestion or guide me through it, I'm not gonna do it for me correctly, I guess, or the right way, as you know, guided, because there is no guidance there, and it wasn't out of the big book. Once I had that good sponsorship, to where if you have a problem or you need guidance, I'm always guided to Alcoholics Anonymous big book. And you know, I mean, we have a chapter called "There Is a Solution." So, and I think I'm just rambling, but I mean, the language for me is in the literature that I understand. And I know a lot of people joke about it, but you know, this book was written for me because it was written for alcoholics. And you know, if they had a success rate of 100% when they first started, and they were only using the knowledge of this, then that just shows me what a miracle this book is. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you so much, brother. Always a joy. You know, we have a proven pathway that works 100% of the time, every time, without fail. Without fail. The only people who don't make it in Alcoholics Anonymous are the can-nots and the will-nots. And a can-not is generally someone who was born with some type of brain problem that they just can't understand, or someone who's taken way too much LSD in their lives and fried all of those brain cells. That puts most of the rest of the people in the category of will-nots. Nope, ain't gonna do it. Ain't no way, ain't no how, not gonna do it. And, you know, when I developed the willingness to do it, and that's all I have to say, someday I can be willing to do this. And that may be the point of change. A couple of you have touched on it. And in our book, who is our book written for? It is written for the chronic, hopeless alcoholic. I am that variety. But because we comply with courts and legal systems and family systems and so on, a lot of these people who come to Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't even know that they're an alcoholic. They may have just gotten into some trouble under the influence of alcohol. That doesn't make him an alcoholic. You know, a guy with three, four, 502s isn't necessarily an alcoholic. Maybe he's just a dumbass that takes 2 drinks and gets affected so heavily he doesn't drive well. I don't know. But and that's something that only the individuals can do. And there again, that's why if we start at the beginning of the book and we can at least make it to page 44, the diagnosing part is done of the self-diagnosis of the only self-diagnosed disease that there is. And if that's the case, then we're ready to move on. You know, most all of us have spiritual struggle in our lives, right? Many people struggle with the God idea. Maybe it comes from our religious upbringing as children, fire and brimstone kind of stuff. But there again, the freedom and responsibility that each one of us is given through step 3 to find, good night Xavier, to find a power that will work for us. And your power doesn't have to look like mine. Doesn't have to look like the popes or the Mormon bishops or the Baptist minister. Oh wait, let me change that. The Southern Baptist minister. You know, your God doesn't have to look like that. It can just be what it needs to be for you. Mary, you have been sitting there so patiently listening and soaking it all in. Would you like to come in and share it with us? There you go.
Right now, I'm Mary, alcoholic. I am so confused. I'm bouncing around like crazy from the book. I do have a copy of the 12 traditions, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm drowning. So, yes, I've got 5 little tiny months in, and a long, I know, but I've got a road to go. So, I found this meeting to be really enlightening and a lot of information. I'm like jotting things down. I'm not sure I'll understand later on when I try to go back, but I know where to go and ask, I think. So anyway, that's about it that I can say, because I'm still processing a lot of what I heard tonight. I wish I could have recorded it. No, honey.
I did record it, and it will be on the podcast channel and the YouTube channel.
Podcast channel?
Yeah.
You have a podcast?
Yeah, it's on our website, and we put it on YouTube too, audio only.
Well, that's way above my knowledge.
It's okay. I'll send you a link.
Cassidy will have to take care of it.
I'll send you a link. All you got to do is touch it, and it'll open it up.
And it says podcasts, like on things.
Okay. Because I think I need to listen to all this a few more times to grasp it in an even mildly adequate way. You're trying to bring in all these scientific laws I had to learn a long time ago that took me years. So now I'm back to square one. And I guess I'm going to be leaning hard on everybody to bring me forward. But I really do appreciate it. And as I said, tonight was quite a wonderful eye-opening experience for me. and I'm still trying to. I'm glad you said there's places I can go to rehear it, because it'll do me a lot of good.
Yes.
So I thank you very much. Do we have a meeting tomorrow night
Yeah, we have our regular big book study tomorrow night.
at 7:30? Correct.
Yeah. Just this meeting is we only do every other month, and next month it will be on the first Monday. It will be our 4-step workshop, and I'm going to go to screen share to show you something, Mary.
Okay.
This is our website page. If you're on a computer, if you're on a phone, it's got 4 little bars up here, and you touch on it, and it'll take you to all of these different things, and it'll show you what our meetings are, and
Can you get me here?
and it'll show you what our media is. And all of these are all of the recordings from the meeting, and all you got to do is click on them. And
all right, I got some work to do.
And our YouTube channel looks like this, and it's got this little guy on there.
Oh wow, that's Mr. Pickle, I guess.
Well, it's not me, but it is certainly a pickle. It's really pretty much our group logo. So I'll send you the link to the channel. Speaking of which, pickles there, Brother Michael, I have something to show you.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a big piece of cake, honey. Did you eat any chicken?
How you going, Jamie? What did I do?
I have no
I'm still
idea.
here.